In times of war, some follow the manual, others rewrite it in fire and smoke. September 1944. Captain Thomas J. Evans, a 28-year-old tank destroyer commander from Texas, stood in the fog-shrouded fields of eastern France, watching an entire German panzer column roll toward his position. 36 massive Panthers and Panzer IVs, the most feared armor in the Wehrmacht, against his small company of lightly armored M18 Hellcats. The rulebook said to engage tanks head-on, to wait for orders, to fight by the numbers. Evans threw the rulebook away. What he did next, using his tank destroyers like chess pieces, sacrificing position for devastating flanking fire, became one of the most brilliant armored victories on the Western Front. In 11 days of battle, his Company C would destroy 39 German tanks while losing only 7 of their own. But it almost never happened, because the tactic he used, it wasn't authorized, it wasn't taught, and it could have gotten every man under his command killed. If you love true stories of battlefield brilliance and impossible odds, hit that subscribe button now, because this is the story of Encirclement, where American ingenuity defeated German steel one unauthorized shot at a time. Thomas J. Evans wasn't supposed to be a hero, he was supposed to be dead. Born in a small town outside Houston, Texas, in 1916, Evans had grown up during the Depression, the son of a failed rancher who'd lost everything in the Dust Bowl. He'd learned early that survival meant improvisation, that when the rules didn't work, you made new ones. That lesson would save his life and the lives of hundreds of others in the fields of France. Evans had joined the Army in 1940, before Pearl Harbor, before anyone thought America would be dragged into another European war. He'd been assigned to the newly formed Tank Destroyer Force, a radical new concept that rejected the slow, heavily armored philosophy of traditional tanks in favor of speed, mobility, and firepower. The M18 Hellcat was the perfect embodiment of that philosophy. At 50 miles per hour, it was the fastest tracked vehicle in the American arsenal. Its 76mm gun could penetrate German armor at range, but its armor was paper thin, barely an inch thick. One hit from a Panther's 75mm gun, and a Hellcat would brew up like a bonfire. "We're not tanks," Evans would tell his men. "We're hunters. We don't trade punches. We strike, we move, we strike again." By September 1944, Evans commanded Company C of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, attached to the legendary 4th Armored Division, Patton's spearhead. His company consisted of 3 platoons, 12 Hellcats total, crewed by farm boys and city kids who'd become brothers in the crucible of Normandy. They'd landed at Utah Beach in July, fought through the hedgerows, raced across France in the breakout from Saint-Lô. They'd seen good men die in burning steel. They'd learned that American tanks were outgunned, out-armored, but never, never outfought. By mid-September, the 4th Armored had crossed the Moselle River near the town of Encirclement, driving deep into German-held Lorraine. It was dangerous ground, exposed flanks, overextended supply lines, perfect country for a German counterattack. And that's exactly what was coming. On the night of September 18th, Evans sat in his command post in the village of Zanray, studying reconnaissance reports by candlelight. German armor was massing to the east, big units, fresh panzer brigades with brand new Panthers straight from the factories. His executive officer, Lieutenant James Leiper, leaned over the map. "Sir, if they hit us with full strength, we're outnumbered 3-1. Evans traced a finger along the terrain, rolling hills, patches of forest, morning fog that settled thick in the valleys. "Then we don't fight fair," he said quietly. Outside, in the pre-dawn darkness of September 19th, the rumble of diesel engines echoed through the mist. The Panthers were coming. The fog was so thick, that morning, you couldn't see 50 yards. At 0700 hours, Sergeant William Dunn's platoon sat in defensive positions on high ground, north of Encirclement, engines idling, crews tense. The Hellcats were hull down behind a ridgeline, only their turrets exposed, the classic ambush position. Then, through the white curtain of a mist, shapes began to emerge. "Contact front," Dunn's gunner whispered into the intercom. "Panthers! Jesus Christ, there's a whole company of them." The German 113th Panzer Brigade had rolled out of the town of Moncourt at first light, confident and aggressive. They'd been told American resistance was light. They'd been told this would be easy, a quick thrust to cut off the 4th Armored Division's spearhead, surround them, destroy them. No one had told them about Evans and his Hellcats. The German tanks advanced in column formation along the road. Textbook movement for breakthrough operations, but suicide against prepared positions. They were buttoned up tight, visibility reduced to almost nothing by the fog. Their commanders scanning through periscopes that showed them only white. At Company C headquarters in Aricourt, Captain Evans received the radio call from Dunn. 6 German Panthers, moving west along the road from Moncourt. They don't see us yet. Evans grabbed his map. The German column was advancing blind, following the road, probably heading for the American positions around Lézy. If they reached Lézy, they'd overrun Charlie Company of the 37th Tank Battalion. And more importantly, they'd be in perfect position to swing south and hit Colonel Clark's Combat Command at headquarters. 400 American soldiers, artillery positions, supply dumps, command and control, all of it exposed. Evans made his decision in 3 seconds. All Hellcat units, this is Charlie 6. Hold your fire. Let them pass. We're going to let them walk right into the kill zone. His radio operator stared at him. Sir? Evans was already moving, shouting orders. Leiper, get your platoon moving south along that tree line. I want you in position to hit them from the flank when they commit to the attack. Radio silence until I give the word. This was the moment that would define everything that followed. Evans wasn't following tank destroyer doctrine. He wasn't engaging from prepared positions. He was hunting, using the fog, the terrain, and German overconfidence against them. He climbed into his own Hellcat. Through his commander's cupola, he could barely make out the shapes of German tanks moving through the mist, like ghosts. Driver, start her up. Nice and quiet. The Hellcat's Continental engine purred to life. Evans keyed his radio. All units, when they reach the crossroads at Lézy and engage our tanks there, we hit them from 3 sides. Aim for tracks and flanks. 1 shot, 1 kill, then move. Make every round count. And then, through the fog, came the sound of German guns opening fire. The German Panthers hit Lézy like a sledgehammer. Charlie Company, 37th Tank Battalion, had 2 Sherman tanks in position at the crossroads, both commanded by young lieutenants who'd never seen combat before September. When the 1st Panther emerged from the fog, barely 75 yards away, their world became fire and thunder. 1 Sherman fired. The round bounced harmlessly off the Panther's frontal armor, a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. The Panther's return shot went through the Sherman's turret like tissue paper. The American tank erupted in flames, its crew bailing out through the hatches, uniforms smoking. The 2nd Sherman reversed desperately, trying to get hull down, trying to survive. The German commander in the lead Panther felt a surge of confidence. This was what they'd been trained for, overwhelming American tanks with superior armor and firepower. He barked orders into his radio, calling up the rest of his company. 5 more Panthers rolled into Lézy, then 10. The entire German column was committing to the attack, funneling into the village, their guns seeking targets. They never saw the Hellcats. Lieutenant Leiper's 3rd Platoon had worked their way south through a depression in the terrain, using a concealed route that kept them completely hidden from German observation. Now they sat 200 yards from the German column's left flank, 5 M18 with clear lines of sight to the thinner side armor of the Panthers. Leiper watched through his binoculars as the German tanks advanced, oblivious. His gunner had already selected their target, a Panther in the middle of the column, its flank completely exposed. Range 200, Leiper said calmly. Traverse left. Steady. His radio crackled. Captain Evans' voice, ice cold. All Charlie units. Fire. Leiper's Hellcat fired first. The 76mm armor-piercing round struck the Panther just behind the turret, penetrating the engine compartment. The German tank shuddered, belched black smoke, and ground to a halt, blocking the road. Then all 5 Hellcats opened fire. In tank warfare, there's a moment of pure chaos when ambush meets surprise, when training and discipline collapse into survival instinct. The German Panthers, suddenly taking fire from an unexpected direction, tried to traverse their turrets to engage, but turret traverse on a Panther was slow, much slower than on an American tank destroyer. The Hellcats were faster. In 90 seconds, Leiper's platoon destroyed 3 Panthers and crippled 2 more. The German column, blocked by burning tanks, couldn't advance and couldn't retreat. They were trapped on the road, and that's when Evans hit them from the north. His platoon came down from the high ground like cavalry, engines screaming, guns firing on the move. The Hellcats' gyrostabilizer, a technology the Germans didn't have, allowed them to shoot accurately even at speed. A 4th Panther exploded. A 5th shed a track and slewed sideways. A 6th tried to reverse and collided with the tank behind it. Through the fog and smoke, Evans could see German tank commanders popping their hatches, abandoning their vehicles, running for the tree line. The trap had sprung perfectly, but the battle was just beginning. By 1000 hours, the fog was lifting, and with it came a terrible clarity. 11 German Panthers lay burning or disabled along the road from Moncourt to Lizay. Evans's Company C had suffered no losses, a perfect ambush, executed with surgical precision. But as the smoke cleared and the battlefield came into focus, Evans realized something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't the main attack. His radio operator handed him a message from Combat Command headquarters. German armor reported massing near Bézange-la-Petite. Estimate 2 full battalions, heading your direction. Evans climbed out of his Hellcat and walked among the destroyed Panthers, his boots crunching on spent shell casings. These tanks were brand new, factory fresh paint, barely any wear on the tracks. The crews he could see were young, some of them teenagers, wearing uniforms that still had creases from the quartermaster's supply. These weren't veterans, these were replacements, which meant somewhere out there, the real German armored force, experienced, battle-hardened panzers, was still intact. Lieutenant Leiper jogged up, his face blackened with powder smoke. "Sir, we're down to 12 rounds per vehicle. If we fight another engagement like that—" "We won't," Evans interrupted. He was staring east toward the German lines, thinking, "They'll change tactics. They know we're here now. Next time they'll come with infantry support, artillery preparation, proper reconnaissance." "So what do we do?" Evans looked at his men. They were exhausted, running on adrenaline and coffee. Some were sitting on their Hellcats, hands shaking, the reality of what they'd just done finally hitting them. They'd killed dozens of German soldiers in less than an hour. Boys, most of them, not much older than the Americans, but this was war, and war didn't offer the luxury of mercy. "We do it again," Evans said quietly, "but better. They want Ericourt? They want to cut off the 4th Armored? Then they have to come through us, and every time they do, we make them pay in blood and steel." That afternoon, German artillery opened up on American positions around Ericourt. The barrage lasted 40 minutes, heavy stuff, 150mm howitzers that churned the earth and sent shrapnel singing through the air. One shell landed 50 yards from Evans' command post, close enough to shower him with dirt. When the shelling stopped, the silence was worse than the noise. Evans knew what was coming. Artillery preparation meant a major assault. The Germans were done probing. Now they were coming in strength. He climbed back into his Hellcat, checking his ammunition count. 8 rounds left. Not enough. Never enough. His driver looked back at him, eyes wide. "Captain, are we going to make it through this?" Evans met his gaze, thought about lying, decided not to. "I don't know, son, but we're going to take a hell of a lot of them with us." The driver nodded, started the engine. They had work to do. 3 days later, the Germans came with everything they had. The 11th Panzer Division, a veteran unit that had fought across Russia, North Africa, and Italy, launched a coordinated assault on American positions around Aricourt. 12 Panther tanks, supported by Panzer Grenadiers and Hoftracks, advanced through the morning fog toward the village of Juvalise. This time, they weren't stumbling blind into an ambush. They had reconnaissance. They had artillery support. They had a plan. But so did Tom Evans. He'd spent the previous 72 hours studying every inch of terrain around Aricourt. He'd positioned his Hellcats, not on the obvious high ground, but in defilade positions, hidden in small valleys and behind buildings, with clear fields of fire, but protected from direct observation. He'd coordinated with the 37th Tank Battalion, with artillery, with the engineers who'd laid hasty minefields on the most likely German approach routes. Most importantly, he'd drilled his crews on one fundamental principle: never fight fair, never trade shots, hit and run. At 09:15 hours, the German assault began. The Panthers advanced in a proper tactical formation this time, spread out, supporting each other, infantry screening their flanks. They'd learned from the disaster on the 19th. They weren't going to be caught in a column again. Evans watched them through his binoculars from a position in Jubilize. His hands were steady, his mind was clear. This was what he'd been training for his entire military career, the moment when everything came down to decisions made in seconds. "They're good," Lieutenant Leiper said beside him. "Professional? Good men die just as fast as bad ones," Evans replied. "Hellcat 2-1, this is Charlie 6. Enemy armor approaching from your 10 o'clock. Let them pass. I want them between you and the Shermans. Another squeeze play, another trap." But this time the Germans were ready for it. When Evans's northern platoon opened fire, the Panthers immediately dispersed, some reversing, some advancing, all of them seeking cover. German artillery began dropping smoke rounds to obscure American observation. Panzer grenadiers dismounted and began working their way forward with Panzerfausts, the deadly German anti-tank rocket that could kill a Hellcat with one shot. The battle devolved into a close-range brawl. Evans's Hellcats would fire, then immediately displaced to new positions before German guns could return fire. The Shermans from the 37th Tank Battalion would pop up from hull-down positions, take a shot, then drop back into cover. The Germans lost 3 Panthers in the first 15 minutes, but then Evans heard the sound every tank commander dreaded, the high-pitched scream of an anti-tank round incoming. One of his Hellcats, commanded by Sergeant Roger Berard, took a direct hit from a Panther. The round penetrated the thin armor and detonated inside the crew compartment. Berard's radio went silent. Evans felt his chest tighten. 5 men, good men, gone in an instant. But there was no time to grieve, no time to process. The battle raged on, and the Germans kept coming. By the afternoon of September 29th, 1944, the fields around Aricourt looked like a graveyard of steel. 39 German tanks, Panthers, Panzer IVs, tank destroyers, lay destroyed or abandoned across the rolling terrain of eastern France. Some were burned-out hulks, their turrets blown off by internal explosions. Others sat silent with broken tracks or shattered engines surrounded by the detritus of war, spent shell casings, discarded equipment, the small personal items that soldiers carry into battle and leave behind in death. Captain Thomas J. Evans stood on the hull of his Hellcat, surveying the battlefield through binoculars. His uniform was filthy with oil and dirt. His face was gaunt from 11 days of continuous combat, with maybe 10 hours of total sleep. His hands, when he lowered the binoculars, trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. Company C of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had lost 7 Hellcats, 28 men killed or wounded, but they'd held. Against overwhelming German armor, against veteran panzer divisions, against every tactical advantage the Wehrmacht could bring to bear, they'd held. The 5th Panzer Army's counteroffensive, the operation that was supposed to destroy Patton's spearhead, cut off the American advance, and throw the Allies back across the Moselle, had failed, and a large part of that failure could be traced directly to the actions of one Texas captain who'd refused to fight by the rulebook. The final German assault had come on the 29th, a desperate push to capture Hill 318, the dominant terrain that overlooked all of Aricourt. The 11th Panzer Division threw everything they had left at that hill: infantry, tanks, assault guns, supported by the heaviest artillery barrage Evans had experienced since Normandy. For 6 hours, the battle raged. American artillery hammered German positions. P-47 Thunderbolts from the 19th Tactical Air Command screamed out of the sky, dropping bombs and raking German columns with .50 caliber fire. And through it all, Evans's Hellcats prowled the battlefield like sharks, appearing from unexpected angles, firing, vanishing before the Germans could respond. At one point, Evans's own Hellcat had been disabled, not by enemy fire, but by a thrown track after maneuvering too aggressively across broken ground. While his crew worked frantically to repair it, a German Panther appeared around a building barely 100 yards away. Evans had grabbed a bazooka from a nearby infantry position and fired it himself, not at the tank's armor, which would have been useless, but at its tracks. The rocket hit, shearing off several links. The Panther ground to a halt, immobilized. Then a Sherman from the 37th Tank Battalion came around the opposite corner and destroyed it with a flanking shot. "Thanks for the setup, Captain," the Sherman commander had radioed. Evans, his hands still shaking from adrenaline, had just laughed. By dusk on the 29th, the Germans were retreating. Not a fighting withdrawal, a rout. Abandoned vehicles littered the roads. German infantry were streaming back toward their own lines, many without their weapons, some without their boots. The 5th Panzer Army had been shattered. That evening, Colonel Bruce Clark, commander of Combat Command A, visited Evans' position personally. Clark was a tough, no-nonsense officer who didn't hand out praise easily. He walked through the positions where Company C had fought, looking at the destroyed German tanks, the churned earth, the evidence of 11 days of desperate combat. He found Evans sitting on the ground, his back against a Hellcat's track, eating cold rations from a can. "Captain Evans." Evans struggled to his feet, saluted. Clark returned it, then stuck out his hand. "I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Service Cross," Clark said, without preamble. "What you and your men did here, I've been fighting this war since North Africa, and I've never seen tank destroyers used more effectively." Evans looked at the ground. "We lost good men, sir." "We did. But because of what you did, we didn't lose 400 more." Clark's voice was firm. "The Germans wanted our corps. They wanted to cut us off, surround us, destroy this entire combat command. Your company stopped them cold. Not just stopped them, destroyed them. 39 tanks, Captain, against 12 Hellcats. It wasn't just us, sir. The Shermans, the artillery, the air support. I know how combined arms works, son, but you're the one who had the guts to throw out the doctrine and fight the battle that needed to be fought, not the one that was in the manual." Clark paused. "The Army's going to study what happened here. They're going to teach it at the armor school. Your name's going to be in the textbooks." Evans thought about that. Thought about Roger Berard and his crew, who died in the first minutes of the September 22nd attack. Thought about the 19-year-old loader in Lieutenant Leiper's platoon, who'd taken shrapnel and bled out before the medics could reach him. Thought about all the names that wouldn't be in any textbook. "With respect, sir, I don't care about textbooks. I just wanted to bring my men home." Clark nodded slowly. "You brought home as many as you could, Captain. In this war, that's all any of us can do." In the years after the war, when historians analyzed the Battle of Arrancourt, they would call it one of the most lopsided armored victories in the European theater. The Germans had committed over 250 tanks and assault guns to the operation. They'd lost nearly half of them, not to superior American armor, but to superior American tactics. Thomas J. Evans would receive the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. He would finish the war, go home to Texas, and rarely speak about what he'd done in France. But the men who'd served under him never forgot. In 1985, at a reunion of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, an elderly veteran, one of Evans's gunners from Company C, was asked by a young historian what it had been like to serve under the captain. The veteran thought for a long moment, then he smiled. "Captain Evans taught us something important," he said. "He taught us that you don't win battles by following the rules. You win battles by understanding what the rules are for and then breaking them when you have to. We were supposed to engage tanks from static positions, wait for them to come to us. He turned us into hunters instead, made us fast, made us lethal, made us think." "Did you ever doubt him?" the historian asked. "Every single day," the veteran laughed, "and the man was crazy. Absolutely crazy, but he was our crazy, and he brought us through hell and back. In war, victories are measured in miles of ground taken, cities liberated, enemy forces destroyed. But the truest measure of victory is simpler than that. It's the soldiers who get to go home, who get to see their families again, who get to live lives beyond the battlefield. Captain Thomas J. Evans and Company C, 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, destroyed 39 German tanks at the Battle of Aricourt. But more importantly, they saved hundreds of American lives by stopping a German breakthrough that could have been catastrophic. Their tactics weren't in any manual, their methods weren't authorized. But they worked, and sometimes, in the crucible of war, that's all that matters. If this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe. Every week, I bring you true stories of courage, ingenuity, and the incredible things ordinary people did when faced with impossible odds. Comment below. What do you think was more important, following doctrine or adapting to win? Let's talk about it. These are the stories that changed history, the decisions made in smoke and fire, the moments when everything was on the line. Thank you for watching. And remember, history isn't just about the big names and famous battles. It's about people like Tom Evans, who did extraordinary things and then went home and lived quiet lives. Heroes who never needed the spotlight because they knew what they'd done and why it mattered. Until next time.